please feel free to unmute yourself throughout the discussion and ask any questions as Bridget is going through. And we'll also do some more of a discussion and question session right after the presentation if you would like to wait as well. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Bridget Peary, who is from Melwood Global, which is TTA's communications team. They're based out of Boston. So with that, Bridget, I will hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Amanda. Great introduction. As she said, I've been with Melwood Global and been working with the Transportation Alliance for 2 years now, and helping them out with a lot of creative content and photo and video. So I'm really excited to be presenting this today, and to be talking with you about taking photos and videos that look professional, even if you only have minimal resources, and how to best promote your company by doing that. So I'm really excited to get started, and I think we can just dive right in. So then moving on to our first slide. So I'm sure, as everyone already knows, social media is a very big part of all of our lives. The daily average that someone spends on social media is just right around 2.5 hours. So clearly it's a lot of time invested there. That's where you're gonna be able to reach a lot of your followers and potential clients. So it's really important that you pay particular attention to that area when promoting your company, because that's, you know, online, the forward-facing part of your company. So because we're all on social media, we know that there's a ton of different content out there, but we know for sure that posts that have photos and videos on social media have significantly higher engagement. There's been a handful of studies done, people who monitor social media, you know, stats like tweets that have video have 10 times more engagement than those without. Facebook post images see 2.3 times more engagement than without. And so keeping in mind that having that for content is going to reach more people. And then, you know, there's tips and tricks to do it well too. So I also included that little stat there that, you know, an optimal video length is 2 to 5 minutes for better engagement. Presenting your photos well are going to get better engagement, because there is so much out there. Everyone gets bombarded, so you want to make sure your content is presentable and engaging for people, so that they stick with you and get excited about that content. So we'll move on to our next slide, where we'll talk about what we're covering today. So I wanted to talk about taking your photos and videos, really the mechanics of that, equipment, framing, lighting, patterns and colors, tips and tricks you should keep in mind for your photos, things that you should avoid, what you can do to edit your photos and videos, what's the best way to crop them, edit them, what tools, apps, and online platforms you have that can be at your disposal to help you best set up your pictures for viewing. And then when you're looking for a photo or video and you can't find one, I wanted to include a little blurb about that just to help you out down the line. So let's start with taking your photos. So there are different levels of photography and videography. And I want you to think about what the best level is for you. Are you able to invest a lot of time and money in better equipment? If not, using your cell phone or smartphone is also going to get the job done. So I'm hoping to talk a little bit about both with you here today, so you kind of get an all-encompassing picture of it. So I think actually right here is where I'd like to ask, are people using professional cameras, or are they more so relying on their cell phones? What's your comfortability level right now with whatever you're using to take photos and videos? Anyone want to jump in?
Okay.
Yeah.
If not, that's okay too.
Predominantly cell phone photos. I do have a driver who is a photographer as well, and occasionally he takes some photos, but mostly cell phone.
Yeah. No, that's great. I'm really glad to hear that you mentioned your driver takes or does photography and can take photos, because that's something I wanted to make sure we talked a little bit about today, is that, you know, you can also take photos and videos, but definitely also recruit your drivers who are out in the streets and picking up clients and are out and about around town, they can definitely take photos and videos too for your social media content. So really making sure that, you know, anyone that is able to is capturing the essence of your company and what day-to-day looks like, sort of like behind the scenes. So I'm really glad you brought that up. So it sounds like cell phones, is that sort of what everyone else likes to use? Either way, I'm going to talk a little bit about professional cameras. Just in case you're curious, there's obviously much more we could get into about that, but really making sure if your cell phone's the way you want to go, that you know, I can help you out and using it to the best of your ability. So really quickly then, the best brands I've seen for professional level cameras are Canon and Nikon. There's the automatic mode, the auto mode, which doesn't require a lot of tinkering from you. But with these cameras, obviously, one size doesn't fit all environments when you're taking photos and videos. There's a lot of different features and settings for different environments. So if you are curious, lots of information there. I'd be happy to share any of that with you. But I did want to just make mention of it that, you know, they're fun to use, but there's a lot to know. But switching back to cell phones, yeah, I think we'll talk about that next. There are some easy ways to capture and edit photos so that they look just like you took them on an actual camera. So we'll move on to our next slide. So when taking your photos, there's a few initial things on your cell phone, I should say. There's a few initial things I think would be best for you to set up and some things to keep in mind when you're taking photos. So the first thing I like to recommend doing is setting up those grid lines on your phone. You can see them there on the far left. So these will help you when you're framing your subject to shoot in the rule of thirds, which we'll talk about in a future slide. I'll go into more detail about that. So you want to go into your settings, in your camera settings, and you can set up that grid right there. It says about halfway down. So that'll help you when you're framing, when you're going to shoot. If you tap your screen, once you're in your camera, that little yellow box is going to appear. That's going to show you what your camera is focusing on. You can adjust the brightness by dragging up and down on that lever on the right. If you hold on to that little box, and if you're in a darker environment, it's going to brighten it up for you. To capture the picture, it's the circle at the bottom there. And if you're looking to take a rapid fire amount or a burst of photos, all you have to do is hold that button down. I'm sure many of you already know that, but I just think it's good to refresh on the basics. And so that at the most initial level, that's what I like to make sure is set up in place when I'm going to use my phone. One thing I wanted to note too is that when you're taking pictures for social media, photos typically perform better when you're shooting them vertical because they fill more of the screen. But when you are shooting video, you're going to want to rotate your phone to the side and take it horizontally, because then videos just look better and they perform better when they're horizontal as opposed to pictures. So we'll move on to framing then, now that I just mentioned rule of thirds. In our next slide, just want to make sure that's up there. So I have two examples here of what rule of thirds might look like. So what rule of thirds is your subject is in the left or the right third of the image, and that's leaving 2/3 or more open. There are lots of other different ways of composing photos, but the rule of thirds generally leads to more compelling, well-composed shots. And once you have those grid lines set up there, it's really easy to frame your subject. It's just going to make it easier for you to take more compelling pictures and have more engagement on social media. And then, of course, when you're also taking photos, you want to avoid zooming in. I'm sure you've seen it before in your photos. It looks super clear when you're zoomed out, and then when you go to zoom in, the further the camera goes in, the more blurry it gets. And it's just because the camera can't take in all of that information from so far away. So you're going to want to step closer to your subject instead of zooming in. So then next, let's talk about framing. So when you are framing, you want to make sure you're in focus using your focus finder on your cell phone. Again, that little yellow box, you can tap on it. It's going to do most of the work for you and say, oh, this is what this person is looking at to capture in their photo. So it's going to make everything nice and crystal clear. You can even auto lock your focus by holding your finger down in that yellow box. And what that's going to do is it's going to lock your subject in place. So even if you move a little tiny bit, or there's things that happen in the background of the shot, it's not going to take your subject out of focus and then have to readjust itself. So it'll just make sure everything stays in focus the way it's supposed to throughout your photo or your video, more importantly. And just a quick brief mention, if you are thinking about using more professional equipment, you would use your shutter button to focus, but you want to make sure that your lenses are always set to autofocus so you're not having to fidget all the time. We'll move on to lighting then next. So lighting is very important for a photo. As you can see on my example on the left here, this is the same house in all different times of day. And you'll notice that depending on what time it is, the house looks completely different. So really keeping that in mind when you're taking pictures is where your light source is coming from. Obviously, there are certain things that happen at certain points of the day that you can't help that. So say it is midday, that's typically when the sun is the strongest and overhead, it's going to cast shadows. So you just want to try and be mindful of where the light is so that you don't cast shadows on someone's face or what you're trying to take a picture of is well lit. But I do want to make mention that the best times of day to take photos are what we call the golden hour. It happens twice a day. It's 1 hour after the sun rises and 1 hour right before it sets. And it just casts a really pretty light over everything. Everything's pretty evenly well lit. So if you're going to pre-plan your pictures, I would try to shoot for either of those times. But if you are shooting in the middle of the day, just be mindful of the light coming straight down and casting shadows over everything. Speaking of lighting, we'll move to our next slide, which is about flash. So your cell phone flash is going to be more forgiving than a professional camera. I would recommend using your cell phone flash in any low light circumstances that you have to take a picture in, because otherwise a camera on your cell phone doesn't have the capability to really capture the same amount of pixels that a professional camera would. So if you use the flash, you're going to be a-okay. But just keep that in mind when you're even indoors. Sometimes the lighting isn't very forgiving, even if it's fluorescent light. So you'll want to use your flash so that you get people's faces or whatever it is that you're focusing on nice and bright and well lit. If you are going to be using a professional camera, that photo on the left there of this young woman, that's the built-in flash that's on the camera, and you can see it causes a harsh shadow right behind her. So that's why I typically like to stay away from using the built-in flash on a professional camera, just because it doesn't look so great. So if you are looking to do the professional camera route, you might want to get a flash attachment because it disperses the light a little bit better. You can see on the right side of the young lady. So there isn't that harsh shadow. Am I moving too fast? Are there any questions so far before I dive into the next half of our presentation? Either on cell phone or on professional cameras? I don't think there is, so we'll keep going. Our next slide. So I wanted to talk about patterns and colors. When you are pre-planning a photo shoot, say you wanted to take like a headshot of your driver or someone that, employee of the month, or even yourself, if you're going to record a video or take a photo, you want to pick solid colors. Make sure you have traditional patterns, a nice big plaid. You want to wear clothes or makeup that complements you and doesn't take away from you, and always classy is better over trendy. You definitely want to avoid having too many accessories on because that's very distracting. Any strong patterns like tiny pinstripes, sometimes those bleed, and it's a little bit distracting in a video because that's all you're looking at. You're not even looking at the person anymore. Colors that blend in too much with the background. Avoid any logos, those can be distracting. And of course, you want to be very careful with sheer clothing when it comes to flash because no one wants that showing. All right, let's move on to our next portion of our presentation, which is going to be about editing. So now you've captured your photos, what do you do next? So I wanted to talk about cropping and editing first. I have this picture of a young boy shooting an arrow. And what I really wanted to point out here was if you notice how they crop this photo down, we're cutting out what looks like a tarp on the ground in the background. vines on the fence, a utility box in the corner, because we want to bring all the attention in on the action of the photo or what it is that we're trying to highlight. So that's why they cropped it like that, to kind of get rid of all those other things that you don't want your audience to focus on. We'll go on to our next slide, which is our editing options on our phone. So once you go into your photo gallery, you can click on your photo, you can hit edit, and you have a ton of different options here to make your photo brighter, more colorful. I would say though, avoid trying to edit to the point where it looks unnatural. So you just want to enhance it, really enhance the color, enhance the brightness, and so there's not too many shadow or anything like that. It's a little dark. What I like to do is bring up the exposure a little bit, especially if it's a little on the dark side. It just brightens things up. A way to increase the color is to bump up your contrast. It's gonna make more of a difference between your lights and darks in a flattering way. Your saturation, which is going to bring out those colors, but be careful again, don't do it too much. And your temperature. There's warm versus cool. It's really about your personal style and what you think looks great on the photo. You also, in your photo gallery on your phone, have effects like time loops, or other effects where you can make the photo bounce and mirror itself, but those are with live photos. I know that you have to make sure that that is also turned on in your phone. So if you have a live photo, you could do something fun like take a picture of your driver opening a door. And then when you go into your editing features and you put the bounce on that, it's going to show him opening the door and then closing the door, opening the door and closing the door. So rather than just having that still stagnant photo, you can do something fun, showing the motion. You could use time loops or time lapse, I should say, where someone's cleaning a car. So you can see them go through the whole process in just a couple of seconds versus a couple of minutes. So really thinking outside the box there and using those features to your advantage to make your content more fun. And again, showing that behind the scenes kind of look. So we'll move on to our next slide. I wanted to talk a little bit about tools and programs that you can use. So as I just kind of walked through, there are many quick edits that can be done on your phone very easily. If you were curious and wanted to use more professional photos on a professional camera equipment, you could use programs like this and really play with the editing features. Lightroom and Photoshop are great for that. You can see that there's some of the things I just mentioned, like exposure and temperature and contrast, but then you can also play with different colors and hues, black and white, which you can also do on your phone. But again, if you really wanted to get in the nitty-gritty of editing photos, you would use programs like this. Canva is one that is online available to you. You can probably use a free trial if you were curious and wanted to see how it worked. But those are, I think, the three best photo editing ones that I typically use. On my next slide, I have video editing tools. So on your phone, you can easily trim your videos. Say you want to clip a few seconds off the beginning and the end because you were setting up, or it ran a little bit too long and you want to kill some of the dead space at the end. You can easily do that on your phone. You can also adjust the color and things like that on your phone the same way you would with photos like I just showed you. But if you wanted to do anything more complex with video, like say you wanted to add your logo on it, or you wanted to add transitions, or add in photos with your video, then you would probably need to use a program like one of these. Premiere Pro is the most complicated of those. It's within the Adobe suite, which you'd have to pay for the whole suite, so it can get kind of expensive. Final Cut Pro, which is up on the top right, a little bit easier, but again, I think it's like $300 to buy. So if you're not looking to invest that much, I wouldn't go that route. iMovie, many of you probably already have, and that's free to you. So you can do a little bit of what I just said, where you can see there in the bottom left, someone dropped in a couple of clips, they dropped in music. So very basic things like that. And then Capwing is an online tool, very similar to iMovie. You have a little bit more wiggle room, a little bit more freedom on what you can drop in. But I've used all 4 of these, and just depending on what level you're looking for, any one of these would be good to use if you know what you want in mind. Moving on to our next slide. So I wanted to talk about, we talked about the mechanics, right, of capturing your content. So now we'll talk about what, the thought that goes behind it. So the photos that you want to take yourself, the photos that your drivers or your staff can take. So really, I think it's important that you think about your audience and what you know is going to appeal to both your riders and new drivers, new business, what's going to attract people to you. Whether it be yourself or your drivers, you want to make sure that you're capturing content that's highlighting the service that your company provides, cleanliness, safety, really the essence of your company. Your drivers can capture things like landmarks when they're out on the road, an event that they drove someone to, a wedding couple, a taxi line at the airport. You can try to instill practices so that, because we all get very busy in day-to-day operations, things can get all over the place and your focus isn't always on trying to take a picture or a video. So implementing something like a pick of the day where, you encourage people to take photos and videos, and then you select one and then you use that for your social media. So trying to find ways to incorporate that in your company's day-to-day operations. So I kind of wanted to open up here a little bit too, and to see if there was any ideas that people have been implementing already or were thinking about that they do in their day-to-day operations, to see if they've had anything that works for them. And if not, totally fine. But like I said, I think there are many different ways that you can incorporate photo and video, even if it's for 5 minutes a day where someone's thinking about it. It's really going to put a face on for your company out on social media, and a personality to it too. So I think it's a very important thing to incorporate for your social media. So we'll move on to our final slide, which, as I mentioned way in the beginning, I wanted to make a quick mention of stock photos and videos. So say you have a holiday coming up that you want to have a picture for, and you don't think there's one that you could possibly take. So you just want to find a stock photo to put up on your social media. You can use Adobe stock for that. Again, you might have to pay for, well, you will have to pay for some of those images. But you could easily embed something from YouTube, a video, or you can go to Google Images to find a stock photo. The only thing I would caution with Google Images is you want to make sure that it's available for you to use as in a Creative Commons license, which you can find that by clicking Tools, and that little drop down there, just select Creative Commons licenses, and then all those images are okay for you to use on your social media for your business. Because you just want to make sure that you are free to use it. If you're thinking of using a photo that you don't have the creative license for, most likely in most scenarios you can credit the source that you got it from, and then you're okay to use it. But again, YouTube is probably the best bet too if you're looking to embed a video, because it's already going to credit the person that posted that video. So I did want to just make a brief mention of that, in case you didn't want to take a picture or a video and you're still looking for something to use in your social media posts, because as we know, photos and videos get much more engagement. And so lastly, I wanted to open it up for questions. Today we talked about how to capture and post creative, engaging content that's going to help grow your audience and your company. Just try to remember that it only takes a little bit of foresight and planning to start populating your social media. It's great to get that behind the scenes look out there and really personify your company to engage your audience and bring in new business. So I'd like to pause here and open it up to any questions. I'd love to hear from you.
Thanks, Bridget. Folks should feel free to unmute themselves to ask questions, or you can put anything in the chat function as well. If folks don't have any immediately, I have a few that have come in ahead of time that we can go through. So can you talk a tiny bit about when you might need to get permission to use an image that people are taking, like, for example, with kids, those kind of like things where it might make sense to have like some sort of general consent form to use an image on your website or social media?
Yeah, that's a little bit of a two-tiered response. So for social media and when it comes to kids, always just ask. You don't want to be in that situation where you take the photo and then the parent comes back later when they sees it somewhere and and then it's just a bad situation. I think if you're using images for social media, it's always good to let people know that their picture is being taken. But I don't think you necessarily need a consent form for that. It would be more so if you're using it on your website or marketing materials or things like that. You would want to get a consent form from that because you're using their likeness for something for your business, as opposed to sharing it for your business where you could profit off of it, as opposed to social media where you're sharing a client or an activity or something your driver is doing. But it's always good to ask. No one is a fan of having their photo taken secretly. So always try to be upfront when you're doing something like that.
Thanks, Bridget. I'm not sure if anybody else has any more, but this is for kind of all the operators. If you have your drivers currently taking photos in any way, what type of pictures do they take? Do they take photos of landmarks, or, if there's a major accident or traffic incident, do they capture those and share them? So hoping folks can talk about that. And Bridget, maybe you can touch on some more of those ideas of what your drivers on the road what you can use them for.
Yeah, I'll open the floor first to anyone who wants to share. And if not, then I can jump in.
I'll hop in real quick if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course.
So I've got a comment and a question about that. We have had drivers before take pictures when they're out on the road, and it's usually like the vehicle in front of, I don't know, a pretty tree in the fall or something like that, which I always thought was really cool. And we put some of them up. And you made a comment earlier about when should you get releases. If we're going to use pictures that drivers take, especially on websites, social media and stuff, I would assume we should probably have some type of release from them or permission to do that in writing, correct?
Permission from the drivers to use their photos?
Yeah.
Yeah, I am not entirely sure of the legal landscape around that. But I do think it would be a good conversation to have that photos that they take can be expected to be used on social media,
okay.
or for marketing materials or the website or things like that.
Okay.
I'm not sure what's legally required, but as far
like
as
these days, you just need everything in writing. Everything should always be in writing.
Yeah, Jeb, this is John here, and it's such a great point, Jeb, and I'll jump in with a little bit of an anecdote. I mean, and this isn't so much with, I agree that, you might want something in writing from the drivers just saying, yes, if I give you a photograph, you're allowed to use it on social media. But
Right.
the other thing that people will run into is, so let's say if you're downtown, or if a driver's downtown takes a picture of something in a public space, that's fair game. That is what happens in public is public.
Right.
And there's nothing that really anybody can necessarily, if you're just taking a street scene, that would be okay. But there was a famous case of, and I can't remember if it was the New York Times or the Wall Street or the Washington Post, but somebody took a picture, one of their staff photographers took a picture of a woman sitting on her porch, which you could say, well, you're out in full view of the world, and they ran the picture, but the woman then said, well, that was an invasion of privacy, and she actually won because she said, on my property, even though I'm in full view of the world, you know, she said I should have a reasonable expectation of privacy. So I think a lot of it just kind of comes down to, like, you know, exercising common sense and I agree 100% with Bridget that, you know, when it comes to children, like I would, it's just, you're in a really dangerous zone if you're going to be taking a picture of a child, of a minor, you know, so probably best to not really run those sorts of pics. And then just one other comment, it's an unrelated comment, but one thing I wanted to mention, you know, Bridget had some examples from Tom Arrighi's company in Massachusetts, A&A Metro, which is a terrific company. And he uses social media, I think, you know, quite effectively, and does videos, really short videos of him at his gas station and saying, we've got great prices for gas, come on down. It's like a 30-second video. And one thing, you know, when you post these photos or videos on social media, a lot of people will say, well, what kind of engagement did I get? Like, oh, I only got like 5 likes on it, so is this really worth it? But the fact of the matter is that when you dig into it, and when you look at, like, yeah, 5 people actually clicked, yes, I like this, but you might have gotten 500 views. And so, you know, we all use social media, and how many times do we actually like the things that we are seeing on social media, because it's this constant stream in front of us. And so the point is, like, don't get discouraged. You know, I don't think anybody should get discouraged if, like, oh, I've only got 5 likes. You know, look at the other metrics of it, of how many people viewed it. Because if you can reach 500 people in your community or in your network and remind them to, like, hey, we have cheap gas. Well, that's 500 that you hadn't reached, you know, beforehand. And it's just, it's cheap, it's effective. So, you know, so metrics can, you know, so just, you know, treat metrics with a little bit of a grain of salt, or dig into the metrics of it to really say, like, is this helping my company? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no, I appreciate that, John. So that's a lot of good advice there.
One thing too, Jeb, and this ties into another question we got about how you can potentially like incentivize your drivers to participate in this and provide you with some content, is if you have like a running incentive program with your drivers, including that in the, like, you know, rules of what we're looking for is that anything you submit as part of this incentive, you know, so if you want to choose to do like a video or photo of the month that you choose, they're automatically giving you permission to use their the photos they're submitting.
Oh yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, and it's always good to give the drivers some love and say this photo was taken by like Bert, or, you know, whoever took it. So that's one other way you can, you know, get the permission right up front as well from your driver.
I like that. It's a good idea, Amanda.
Deb, did you have another question, or did we cover that?
Nope, you've covered all mine. Thank you.
Perfect. Bridget, another question that came in about setting the grid lines on your phone. So can you just kind of walk us through how to do that? Because I don't think you do it within the camera itself. You do it in, for example, on iPhone, in iPhone settings. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I'm going to do it right now so that I'm not missing any steps. So you would go into your settings. You would scroll down to, you saw camera. It should be like halfway down. If you click on camera, that's that setting screen that I had in the slide. The only thing you really have to worry about is the grid option, and enable that. Anything else on here isn't necessarily important. There is an option for scan QR codes. You should enable that just because that's useful for you. But there's not really anything else that you need to mess with other than the grid there. Unfortunately, I don't have an Android to show how you would get to that specifically, but I'm fairly certain it would be the same process, going to your settings, your camera settings, and then there should be an option for you to enable those grid lines to show up automatically on your camera.
Thanks, Bridget.
I'd like to share an idea I had while you were talking about photos of the month. I think it would be fun to engage the drivers into taking a picture of their cab in different locations and post it as a guessing game to engage whoever's following us. You know, do you know where this is? Do you know where that is? You know, in our geographical area. I haven't gotten to that. I don't think I want to do prizes, but I think it would be fun to have people guess, you know, where is this store? Where is this tree? Whatever.
I love that, Joanne.
You like that?
I do. And because the other thing that it shows is it shows that you're a part of the community, that you understand the community, and you know every street corner and every shop, and
Oh, yeah, we do.
and this is something that the competition, we all know who we're talking about, right? That
Mhm.
they don't understand that stuff. And along the same lines, like, you know, thinking about, you know, this industry, our industry, and the Transportation Alliance and all the members, like one of their big pushes has always been like, we're the safe option. We're the people who know what it takes to move people safely. And so that's where what maybe an operator might think is a boring picture of like a guy changing a tire is actually a really important picture for your audience and your passengers to understand. You know, it's like there was a famous ad campaign years and years ago by Volkswagen where they took out ads and it just showed like an old Volkswagen, not an old, it showed like a brand new Volkswagen Beetle, and the caption just said lemon, and it said, this Volkswagen does not meet our safety standards, or like there was something wrong with this, and like, yes, it rolled off the assembly line, but we're not going to sell it to you because that one doesn't pass our high standards, you know, and the only thing that we're going to sell to you is something that does have high standards. And so in other words, like, you know, I think just by showing like the care, showing people like tinkering with an engine, changing the tires, you know, cleaning a car, all of that it all sends a great message of safety. So.
That's great. Bridget, when we're talking about like being in the community and taking photos around the community, can you talk about the importance of like tagging companies that you're promoting on social so you can increase your reach and engagement? I know we're going to cover this in a future webinar, in future webinars specific to like Facebook and Twitter engagement and Instagram, but perhaps you can just touch base quickly on helping to make this content go further.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point and definitely fits in with photos and when you're posting them. Definitely tag any local businesses that are within the shot or featured within the shot, because they're in turn going to share your posts because you've tagged them in it. And that's going to reach both your audience, their audience, and beyond that as well. So not only tagging, say the mayor is in one of your photos, you're going to want to tag an elected official like that, using hashtags that are relevant. So maybe there's a community event going on and there's a hashtag for it. Definitely use that within your posts, because then you're going to reach all those people who are following along with that thread, that hashtag thread. So for events, even for holidays, it's always a big one, is that people love to see that stuff on social media. So you're only going to increase your reach by tagging in that way and using hashtags in that way.
Actually, I do have a quick comment about that.
Mhm.
So it was last Christmas. We like a lot of transportation operators do a lot of work for medical brokers, or Medicaid and Medicare transportation. And I think the one thing you do have to be very careful about is the HIPAA laws, using images and names and things like this. we had a great scenario. It's fantastic, where the driver went out of his way to get Christmas gifts for one of the passengers that wasn't going to be able to afford it, and he provided a great Christmas, and he took video of it, and it was great. And you saw the passenger getting the gifts, and it was very heartfelt and warm. But he said, unfortunately, fortunately and unfortunately, he said the passenger's name. So we couldn't use the video at all, because now you're treading on the lines of a HIPAA violation by using a passenger's name who is under one of these brokerage agreements. So just footnote there, remember who's paying the bill and what regulations might be in place there when you say and do things.
Absolutely. No, that's I think absolutely correct, Jeb. That is an area that you do have to be super cautious. And unfortunately, I don't know all the nuances around HIPAA laws in that way, but it's something you want to make sure you absolutely have the consent for to do when it's content like that or a company like that. So you don't want to get anyone in trouble, no matter how good the story is.
One other thing for folks to consider tagging too is your city or county tourism board, or like if they have a, I live in Alexandria, so the Alexandria Facebook page or Twitter page, I can tag them in photos. So whatever your local, town pages, take a look at that, and it's a good thing to tag them as well, because they might help amplify your content. So I'll take a quick break from the questions we have pre-submitted to see if anybody else has any questions right now.
Bridget, I just want to throw in one thing, because I'm your Android guy if you ever need it. For anyone who has an Android phone, because I'm anti-Apple, for setting up the grids and stuff like that, or fooling around with the settings, you actually go to the camera first and launch the camera. And through there is, on the bottom left, is the settings tab. And then through that, you can set up your grids and stuff like that. So that's how you do it on an Android. That is all.
Thank you, Mike. I have not had an Android in probably 10 years, so I appreciate your expertise in the area.
So Bridget, we've talked a lot about using social media, like video and photo content on social media, but can you talk about perhaps some other ways that you can make this video or photo content go even further? So we've talked about putting it on the website and putting it on social, but can you also talk maybe like how you might be able to repurpose it into a blog or different other content that you can further amplify?
Yeah, definitely posting to your feed, including on your website. If you have a YouTube channel, that's one thing actually I don't think I mentioned. It's really easy to post a photo to your feed or to your website, but video, obviously the file sizes are enormous. And so if you try to post a video on your website, it might slow the page down so that your page won't even load. So what you're going to want to do is get yourself a YouTube channel and post it on your YouTube channel so that you can embed it on your website. So it doesn't make your website slow down, because then that's no use to you if people are going there and they can't get anything to show up on the page. For social media, if you're posting your videos, as long as they're under a certain length, I think I mentioned in one of the beginning slides, 2 to 3 minutes is kind of, or maybe it's 2 to 5 minutes is kind of the ideal sweet spot for videos, because of people's attention span, but also because of the file size. And it might just give you problems if you're trying to upload them. And then cross-posting. Definitely if you have a blog or somewhere that, or Medium that you write more long form commentary on. Facebook did have a feature like that where you had more space. It was more long form writing than just the posts themselves on the feed. But then you can also use things like stories for the quick hits and things like that when you're posting something daily. Instagram has stories, Facebook has reels. I don't know. I think in our last webinar we talked about TikTok, but TikTok is a great platform for sharing short videos that the exposure is really great on, because their algorithm is much different than Instagram and Facebook. Their algorithm shares with many, many more users, not just your followers. So that's another great place too. If you have video that you want to share, TikTok is a good platform for that.
Awesome. Thanks, Bridget. In addition to photos and videos, we just want to remind folks about the Ride Local Massachusetts campaign and the Ride Local Massachusetts graphics that you can have customized for your company. So we've talked about photo and video content. One additional form of content is graphics, infographics that you can use. In this case, the Ride Local Massachusetts campaign, one feature of this is that we will customize the Ride Local decal specific to your company, which you can then use on social media, or you can order, stickers for your cars, whatever you'd like. But as part of this campaign, that is a free resource to you. So if you'd like to take advantage of that, you can email us. I'll put the information in the chat and put that in here as well. So that's a free resource to you as well. But Bridget, if there's other graphic ideas that might make sense that are easy and free to do, those are great too.
No, I'm glad you said that. It actually just made me think of it, because we were talking about different opportunities for photos and things out about town. Definitely take advantage of the Ride Local logo. But you can use that logo or your own company logo. If your community has, posting boards somewhere, or, billboards inside of, either public buildings or businesses, or you'll find people tack up listings or lost dog flyers or something like that, take advantage of those too. Put, your company logo, your company picture up there. And if anyone's ever there, they can snap a picture and say, do you know where our picture is right now? So again, just another way to include local businesses and places around the community that the public is going to see, and they're going to see your picture as an established business in the community.
Thanks, Bridget. So I just put the link in the chat. If you go to ridelocalma.com/contact, that'll bring you to our contact submission form. And all you have to do is just put your name, your email address, and then in the message, put that you are interested in customizing the Ride Local graphics. And Bridget, John, and I will be in touch with you about how we can get that done for you. So feel free to submit that, or if you're interested right now, you can also raise your hand and we can make a note and follow up with you directly after this. So if folks are interested, you can just let us know. Great, Joanne, I've got you. Perfect. Awesome. All right, any other questions? Bridget, is there anything else you want to touch base on?
I don't think so. I just want to say thank you everyone for tuning in. And if this was your second time coming back to my second webinar, welcome back. And so the newcomers, welcome. And I hope you join us on the rest of ours.
Yeah, thanks so much, Bridget. Again, our next webinar is going to be next Tuesday, hosted by Jeb Corey. We're going to be talking about how we can enhance your website or help you build one from scratch. And that's also going to include some free technical support that we can provide, some direct assistance specific to your website. So the invitation for that should be going around later this afternoon or first thing tomorrow. So it'll be at the same time next Tuesday at 1:00 p.m. Eastern. All right. Well, Well, with that, thank you everybody so much for joining us today, and we hope to see you again in the future. Thanks so much.
Thank you, everyone.